Alright, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Southwest Portland. If you don't live near here and or take transit through here regularly, then you might not realize just how much service there is in just this very small stretch of Portland. I will explain things in this video, trying to use official resources like Forward Together, which I've made a couple of videos on, or the Southwest Corridor Light Rail Project, which I will link in the description. First, let's sort of familiarize ourselves with this general area of Portland. There are lots of routes that sort of feed into Portland from the southwest that all sort of parallel each other. You've got Barber Boulevard, I-5, Macadam Avenue, and other smaller roads. I'm going to be putting a pretty heavy focus on the Barber Boulevard portion of this video because I think it is interesting. From above, it kind of looks like this. Buses that go on Barber Boulevard just kind of exit downtown Portland and will end up on Barber Boulevard. There are 3 different ways that buses can do that, and I'll hopefully remember to explain that later. But once the buses are on Barber Boulevard, you have a choice to either stay on it or take the branch that goes over to Capitol Highway, and where Capitol Highway begins, and then from here there are lots of roads that branch off from here, so there are lots of routes. If you want to get an idea for how many bus lines travel through here, just take a look at this sign. The 94 goes through here as well, but it's basically just a 12 with far less stops. So let's talk about the routes that stay on Barber. 1, 12, 38, and 94. I'll begin with the 12 because it's dedicated to only Barber Boulevard. It just runs straight through with a single turnoff into the Barber Transit Center and ends up at Tigard Transit Center. Very simple. Line 1 runs only to Bertha Boulevard before turning off and eventually running down Vermont Street. Line 38 runs until Terwilliger Boulevard and goes to Boones Ferry Road where it ends up in Tualatin. Line 94 is the same as the 12, but way faster. It also continues to Sherwood on Pacific Highway, which is the same road. Now time for the Capitol Highway branch. 44, 45, 54, 55, 56. The 44 pretty much stays on Capitol Highway the whole time. Right now there is a detour due to road construction, but that should return to normal at some point. The 45 uses Capitol Highway until it reaches Garden Home Road and takes that until Washington Square. It's a little different through Multnomah Village, staying on 40th Avenue rather than diverting to Capitol Highway, but that's getting really technical. This bus then continues through a neighborhood to Tigard Transit Center. The 54 stays on Capitol Highway only until Beaverton-Hillsdale Highway and stays on that until Beaverton Transit Center. The 56 is similar, but branches again at Shoals Ferry. The 55 goes on to Sunset Boulevard and Hamilton Street, but runs quite close to the 54 and ends in Raleigh Hills, right off the 54. There's more to talk about. Further on to both Barber and Terwilliger are other major roads with buses. From Barber Boulevard, the 38 turns onto Terwilliger to lead to Boones Ferry. The 39 runs on Capitol Highway and turns onto Terwilliger and goes to Barber. That whole stretch of Terwilliger can be caught from either road, Barber or Capitol Highway. In my opinion, Terwilliger should get its own line, possibly numbered as 40 Terwilliger. The numbers would line up with today's 38 and 39. Although I am aware of Forward Together, and so the numbers wouldn't really line up anymore. Line 65 does have service on more of Terwilliger as well. It travels from OHSU down Terwilliger, passing Capitol Highway and eventually going on to Barber, but still Terwilliger doesn't get a dedicated bus line. Forward Together shows that Line 35 could branch and serve a larger portion of Terwilliger, including portions that are not serviced by anything today, but still not the entire corridor. Finally, the 61 and 64. The 61 comes down Terwilliger from OHSU and goes on to Capitol Highway until Beaverton-Hillsdale Highway, mostly following the 54. The 64 starts the same by going from OHSU down Terwilliger to Capitol Highway, but stays on it until the Barber Transit Center, similar to the 44. It then continues to Tigard Transit Center. This is proof to me that the 43 and 44 could also serve the Barber Transit Center. So, what about the Southwest Corridor project and Forward Together? The Max Green Line would get extended south down Barber Boulevard until the Barbur Transit Center, where it would then stop running in the median. Surely you wouldn't want to keep the bus service the same here. The 12 on Barbur wouldn't really need to exist. So here's what I would do to each line. 1. No change, but maybe extend to Washington Square and provide a lot more service. Advertise somehow that this serves Gabriel Park. Weekday morning rush trips to Portland as well as evening rush trips to Washington Square could go through the Shattuck Loop, or Maplewood Loop, whatever it's called. Through Forward Together, this is being renumbered as the 42 and is getting extended to Washington Square and is getting provided with more trips, although the Shattuck Loop portion would be discontinued, which is a bit unfortunate, especially for the high school students who live off of the line. 12. Shortened to just downtown Portland and Sandy only. It would become the 12 Sandy Boulevard. I'll talk about extra Barbur service later. 38. No change, but extend hours so that people can use Boone's Ferry all day. Weekday rush hour trips would be the only ones traveling through that neighborhood on Kerr Parkway. Line 38 is going to be discontinued through Forward Together, which is unfortunate. I really would like to see some sort of service being able to leave downtown Portland and use Boone's Ferry, but it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. 39. Well, they're planning on canceling this one too, but I would extend this route to, instead of looping and doing the large loop up on the top on Capitol Highway, I would instead have the route go straight down Barbur and enter Portland the same way the 38 does. Or, if you wanted to retain more service on Terwilliger, you could have it extend to Capitol Highway, and after entering Portland, serve the same stops as the 38. Well, unfortunately, I just realized that the reason the 39 does what it does is because it's more or less meant for the high school students, and so it kind of has to run through these areas. So unfortunately, there's probably no easy way to change the 39, and there's definitely not a reason to have it not serve the high school there at Capitol and Sunset. So unfortunately, we might have to stick with this weird routing for now. Then my new Line 40 idea would travel exclusively on Terwilliger, would not enter OHSU at all. 44. No major change, just run these more frequently. This is a highway. However, I would like to see this route serve the Barbur Transit Center as it goes right by it. It's within walking distance, but I'd rather see it serve the transit center directly. Same thing with the 43. 45. No change. This bus desperately needs a frequently update. It runs worse than hourly pretty much all day. Probably part of the reason why I don't really ride it all that much. I've only been on it twice so far. And Forward Together is going to make it way worse, where 45 will no longer enter downtown Portland and will only run during high school times for the students, which is too bad. 51. Okay, this route doesn't really run onto either Capitol Highway or Barbur, but I'm talking about it because of one huge change I would make. I would extend this route all the way down Dosh until it becomes 30th Avenue. That leads into Capitol Highway and eventually, of course, can lead into the Barbur Transit Center. Forward Together is planning on extending it to Capitol and Sunset, and I believe, I'm going to have to look at it again, that it goes all the way to Barbur and Bertha, which is still fine, but it will serve the high school students, but I would like to see it go all the way to Barbur Transit Center somehow to connect with more transit. 54. Again, just a frequency upgrade would be needed. This route needs real frequent service, not cheating by combining 30-minute service with the 56. Now, this is actually going to change as part of Forward Together, and I'm very excited for that. 55. This route could be completely canceled, and I think it'd be fine. Forward Together, again, is planning on completely canceling the 55. However, you could have some service retained by even using the 13th Avenue station on the future Max Southwest Corridor, so Barbur and 13th, using Bertha Boulevard briefly onto Capitol Highway, and then the normal route on Sunset Boulevard, but to Dosh and Hamilton only. Basically, that turnaround would change it so that the 55 ends at Dosh and Hamilton, and the 51 does more of Dosh until Barbur Transit Center, like I talked about earlier. 56. No change here. Really just do the forward together improvements of bringing it into OHSU and extending it further into the Progress Ridge development. All the Markham Hill routes I wish would stay, but they're not going to, so yeah. The 61 doesn't really need to be changed. And the 64, well, after Southwest Corridor gets built, the Green Line would basically be serving this route from the Gibbs station all the way until Hall Boulevard. So the 64 definitely doesn't need to exist after the Southwest Corridor project gets built, hopefully. 65 could also be canceled and replaced with my new Line 40, because Terwilliger Boulevard. 94. Because Max would be providing the main service on Barbur, these would only go from Barbur Transit Center to Sherwood. I suppose on weekdays you could keep some express trips that only serve the following stops between Tiger Transit Center and Barbur Transit Center. So this means Barbur and Capitol Highway would get lots of services, although more would be using Capitol Highway, such as the 44, 45, 54, and so on. 43 and 56, as well as any other new services that could be built through this area, wouldn't really be feeding into downtown Portland, but instead would be going to OHSU through the Forward Together plans. Okay, this probably went on too long, just teaching you some of the heavily traveled portions of TriMet's service. It's cool if you're waiting for a bus in this portion to get to Portland. You only have to wait a few minutes before a bus arrives, and that's if you just miss one. Anyways, thank you for watching.